Welcome back, everyone, to Baha'i on Air.
I'm Jane.
I'm Mark.
It's good to be back for another deep dive.
Yeah, it's always exciting to explore these really rich and thought-provoking, pieces of Baha'i writing, and today is certainly no exception.
Right.
So we're turning our attention today to a statement titled "The Promise of World Peace."
Okay.
And this wasn't a kind of recent commentary or analysis, on the state of the world.
Right.
This was a letter that was issued by the Universal House of Justice way back in October of 1985.
Okay.
And it was to commemorate the UN International Year of Peace.
I see.
And what's, I think, so striking about this document right from the get-go is who it was actually addressed to.
Okay.
Because it wasn't, just for those within the Baha'i community. It was actually addressed to all the peoples of the world.
Wow, that's really amazing.
Yeah, and I think that really speaks to the scope and the intent of this statement. And
right, and the purpose behind it is just as, far-reaching. This statement is really offering an original, and I think as we explore it, you'll find a profoundly insightful perspective on achieving something that has really echoed in the hearts of humanity for centuries.
Right.
And that's lasting global peace.
Absolutely. And, for those of you who might be listening who are perhaps less familiar with the Baha'i faith,
right,
it's important to know that this deep concern for peace is not something new
right,
for well over a century.
yes,
It's been a core principle at the very heart of the teachings that were brought by Bahá'u'lláh, the founder of the faith,
yes,
and whose central message really revolves around this fundamental concept of the oneness of humankind.
yes. And what's so compelling about, Baha'u'llah's message is his understanding of why this long toward peace is not just a, desirable ideal,
Right.
but an unfolding necessity.
Yeah.
He observed that the very currents of historical progress, the leaps in technological capability and a growing awareness of our shared human experience
Right.
are all converging and making the embrace of world unity and peace an inevitable next step for humanity.
So really for our deep dive today, our aim is to really explore the layers of insight within this statement.
Yes.
From a Baha'i viewpoint, to connect these ideas to the broader tapestry of Baha'i life.
Yeah.
To understand their deeper meaning, how they can resonate and be applied in each of our individual lives, and ultimately how they hold the potential to really reshape the very fabric of our global society.
I love that.
So we'll be focusing on specific sections of this really powerful letter and really try to unpack those core messages being conveyed.
Okay.
So let's get started by looking at the very beginning of the statement where it talks about reaching a critical juncture.
Okay.
What does that actually mean?
Well, it begins with this really powerful assertion that the great peace, something that people of goodwill have yearned for across generations,
Right.
is now for the first time in our shared history
Right.
within reach. And it's not attributed to, some sudden change of heart or anything
Right.
like that, but rather to the fact that for the first time we can truly see our entire planet with all its beautiful diversity as a single interconnected home.
And it's really interesting here where it takes a really interesting turn,
Okay.
where the statement doesn't just say that peace is a possibility.
Right.
It actually presents it as something inevitable.
Wow.
Like it's going to happen. And it describes this achieving world peace as the next natural stage in our planet's very evolution.
Oh, wow.
It even uses this really cool phrase, the planetization of mankind.
Yeah.
It suggests that the forces driving us together are so strong
Right.
that this unity is the direction that human destiny is headed in.
I see.
And then it goes on to lay out this really stark choice that's laid out for humanity. Okay, will we arrive at this state of global peace after immense suffering by clinging stubbornly to outdated ways of thinking and acting that divide us? Or can we, through a conscious and collective effort,
Right.
through genuine consultation and a shared will,
Yes.
can we choose to embrace this peace now?
I see.
And I think the statement really emphasizes the profound responsibility we have in this moment.
Yeah, it really highlights the gravity of our situation, doesn't it?
It does.
You know, in our deeply interconnected world where actions in one corner of the globe can have immediate repercussions everywhere,
Right.
the statement suggests that failing to actively address the root causes of conflict and disorder would be an act of incredible irresponsibility,
Right.
with consequences none of us can afford.
Yeah, and it really brings it home to each one of you listening.
Yeah.
You know, this isn't just some matter for politicians or international bodies to figure out.
Yeah.
This statement's very clear in conveying that every single person on this planet has a meaningful and vital role to play in nurturing a healthy transformation of our shared values and the overarching goals of humanity.
Okay, so let's move on to the next part of the statement, where it points to favorable signs.
Okay, favorable signs.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, in a world where we're constantly bombarded with negative news, it's easy to feel despondent.
Absolutely.
So, you know, even back in 1985, this statement reminds people of the real strides that humanity has already taken.
Right.
It mentions, you know, the initial, albeit ultimately limited steps towards a global order with the establishment of the League of Nations.
Right.
And then the far more comprehensive and enduring United Nations organization.
Absolutely. So, you know, there were these concrete attempts to bring nations together on a global scale.
Yes, exactly.
What else did the statement consider a positive sign?
Well, a really significant development highlighted was the widespread achievement of independence by the majority of nations following the Second World War.
Okay.
And if you were to look at appendix of the original statement, you'd see a substantial list of countries across Africa.
Okay.
Places like Mauritania, Nigeria, Tanzania, Zambia, that gained their sovereignty during this period.
Oh, wow.
And this represents the culmination of a major phase of nation building that allowed these newly independent nations to participate in global affairs.
Yeah.
Alongside, you know, older powers to address shared concerns.
So it's a fundamental shift in the structure of the world.
Absolutely.
I mean,
the statement also underscores the remarkable increase in collaboration among diverse groups who had previously been isolated or even antagonistic towards one another.
Okay.
And this growing cooperation spanned crucial fields like science education, law, economics, and culture.
Okay. So there's really this widening recognition of our shared interests.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And this wasn't just at the government level, was it?
Not at all. The statement specifically notes the significant rise in the number and influence of international humanitarian organizations in recent decades.
Oh, okay.
It also points to the growing strength and visibility of women's and youth movements, actively advocating for peace and a more just world.
Right. So this is grassroots movements kind of pushing us towards greater unity.
Exactly. And perhaps most fundamentally, it highlights the organic development of networks of ordinary people reaching across borders, seeking understanding and connection through direct personal communication.
It's really easy to overlook these positive undercurrents when the headlines are dominated by conflict and all the negativity that's going on in the world.
That's so true.
So the next section of the statement turns our attention to scientific and technological advances.
Okay.
How do these contribute to the promise of world peace?
Well, the statement makes a crucial point. That these incredible advancements in Appendix 2 provide some compelling examples. Things like the advent of powered flight, the development of modern computers, medical breakthroughs like CT scanners, transatlantic radio. These have actually provided us with the practical means to tackle humanity's most pressing problems. They offer the tools and the capacity for administering a complex, interconnected global society.
Okay, so the technological capability for a unified world is there.
Yes.
But the statement also recognizes that there are still substantial barriers hindering this progress. What are some of the key obstacles that are identified?
No, some of the persistent challenges the statement emphasizes include ingrained doubts about the possibility of lasting peace. Persistent misconceptions about human nature and other cultures, deeply rooted prejudices that divide us. Suspicion and mistrust between nations and peoples. And that often short-sighted, narrow self-interest that can overshadow the collective well-being of humanity.
So it's really recognizing that even though we have the means, there's still some big things to overcome before we can get to this unified world. And to really underscore this idea of our increasing interconnectedness, the statement includes this kind of shrinking of our planet concept.
Yeah, can you elaborate a little on what that illustrates?
Well, it's really a powerful way to visualize how the world has changed. So the statement, highlights this dramatic acceleration in both travel and communication speeds over the course of, human history.
Okay.
So if you go back 500,000 years, the idea of traversing the globe was just, unimaginable.
Right.
Even a few thousand years ago, would have been a multi-generational endeavor.
Right.
And then particularly in the last century, we've seen this absolute explosion in our ability to move and communicate across vast distances in mere hours or even instantly.
Right.
So this shrinking of the planet, really powerfully illustrates how interdependent we've become.
Yes.
What happens on one side of the world now has immediate and tangible effects on the other.
That's so true.
And so it reinforces the idea that our old isolated ways of thinking are no longer adequate for this new reality.
Right.
It emphasizes this need for global consciousness to match our global reach.
Exactly.
The next section of the statement introduces a deep sense of spiritual and moral duty. So tell me a little bit about that.
So this is where the statement brings in a distinctly Baha'i perspective.
Okay.
It explains that the Universal House of Justice, as the elected international governing body of the Baha'i faith and the trustees of Baha'u'llah's teachings, feels a profound spiritual and moral obligation to share insights that were first communicated by Baha'u'lláh himself over a century ago.
And these weren't just, abstract philosophical ideas.
Right.
These were direct counsel and warnings addressed to the most powerful leaders of his time.
Yeah.
Who are some of those rulers that Baha'u'lláh addressed?
The statement specifically mentions figures like Tsar Alexander II of Russia, Pope Pius IX, Sultan Abdu'l-Aziz of the Ottoman Empire, and Kaiser Wilhelm I of Prussia.
So these are the emperors, the popes, the rulers who held significant sway over the world at that time.
Exactly.
And Baha'u'lláh, despite facing imprisonment and exile, felt compelled to directly address them about this critical need for unity and peace. Moving on, the statement then delves into the winds of despair.
Okay, the winds of despair.
This sounds like a particularly poignant part of the letter.
It is. In this section, the statement analyzes Baha'u'llah's prophetic warnings about the winds of despair and the increasing strife that would afflict humanity if it failed to heed the call for unity.
Right.
And tragically, as we look back at the decades since the statement was issued, and even at the century prior, we can see the unfolding of many of these predictions. The continued inability of international bodies like the UN to eradicate war.
Right.
The recurring threats of global economic instability, the rise of anarchy and terrorism in various forms, and the widespread human suffering that persists across the globe.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed when contemplating these global challenges.
Right.
Does the statement offer any perspective on this feeling?
It does. It does, specifically by addressing a very common and often deeply ingrained belief, the idea that aggression and conflict are simply an inherent part of human nature, something we can never truly overcome.
Okay, so we're just kind of doomed to repeat.
Right. It's in our DNA.
Right, okay.
But the statement directly challenges this deterministic view, suggesting that these negative manifestations are not our fundamental reality.
Okay, so that leads us to the next point, which is this concept of outdated social and political organization.
Okay, outdated social and political organization.
So what's the core argument here?
The central argument is that while our scientific and technological capabilities have advanced at an unprecedented pace, our social and political structures, the ways we organize ourselves as societies and nations, haven't kept up with this rapid progress.
Okay, so we've got this lag between
this
technology and how we're governing ourselves.
Exactly. The statement contends that this lag is a major factor hindering our ability to solve global problems and move towards a more peaceful and just world.
So we're trying to navigate a vastly changed reality
using outdated systems.
Exactly.
Okay, and to counter that idea that war is simply part of our DNA. We're hardwired for this.
Right.
The statement uses a historical example.
It does. It points to the remarkable and sustained period of peace that Sweden has enjoyed since 1814.
Okay, Sweden.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the underlying logic is that if a nation can successfully establish social and legal frameworks to effectively restrain violent tendencies within its population for such a long time, then surely the global community can, in principle, develop similar international mechanisms to restrain the aggressive impulses of nations.
So it's not saying that it's impossible.
Exactly, right. And the critical difference now the statement emphasizes is the dramatically increased danger posed by modern weaponry, which makes large-scale conflict not just morally reprehensible, but potentially catastrophic for all of humanity.
Yeah, so aggression in this context becomes self-destructive on a global scale.
So it's not about trying to fundamentally alter human nature overnight.
Right.
But it's about evolving our collective systems.
Yes.
Recognizing the new realities of our interconnected world.
Exactly.
The next section of the statement discusses a distortion of the human spirit.
Okay, a distortion of the human spirit.
What do they mean by that?
Well, this is a really profound insight at the heart of the Baha'i teachings.
Okay.
The statement asserts that conflict, rather than being an intrinsic part of who we are, is actually a perversion, a distortion of our inherent human spirit.
Okay.
And understanding this is absolutely key because it shifts our focus.
Okay.
Instead of trying to suppress some innate aggression, we can concentrate on setting in motion social forces that are truly aligned with our deepest nature forces of harmony, cooperation, and love.
So rather than focusing on what's wrong with us, let's focus on what's right with us and try to build from there.
Exactly.
Which then connects beautifully with the idea of humanity's evolutionary journey.
Okay.
What's the Baha'i perspective on that?
Well, the Baha'i view understands the current global turmoil.
Right.
And the seemingly chaotic state of world affairs.
Yeah.
Not as signs of an ultimate failure, but rather as necessary and even natural phases within a larger organic process.
Okay.
That is a process of humanity gradually maturing and inevitably moving towards the unification of the entire human race within a single interconnected global social order.
So this is a journey of collective development.
Yes, exactly. It's like we're all on this journey together.
And the statement uses an analogy to illustrate this journey, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It likens humanity's collective progress to the stages of an individual's life.
Okay.
So we've passed through infancy with its dependence and lack of understanding.
Right.
Then a turbulent childhood marked by exploration and occasional conflict.
Right.
And now as a global community, we're in the culminating period of our adolescence, approaching maturity.
Okay.
This is a time often characterized by upheaval, rapid change, and growing pains. But it's ultimately leading towards a more unified, responsible, and mature state of global civilization.
So we're just teenagers right now as a planet.
We're just teenagers.
Okay.
That's a good way to put it.
And the statement also includes a quote from the theologian and scientist Pierre Teilhard de Chardin.
Yes.
What's the significance of that inclusion?
Well, Teilhard de Chardin's quote beautifully supports this idea of an evolving global consciousness.
Okay.
He speaks about humanity gradually acquiring a deeper understanding of its own being, its shared history, its environment, its collective capabilities, and even the deeper mysteries of its own soul.
Wow, so all this knowledge is being built upon.
Yes, exactly.
Generation after generation.
And he emphasizes that this growing body of collective knowledge and understanding is not lost.
Right.
It's inherited and built upon by each new generation, with each adding its own unique contribution to this unfolding human story.
So the challenges we face today are almost like necessary growing pains.
Precisely.
As the subsequent section of the statement suggests.
Right. The statement explains that acknowledging these less mature stages of our collective development, things like prejudice, the resort to war, and economic exploitation, isn't a cause for despair.
Okay.
On the contrary, it's a vital and necessary step. It's a prerequisite for consciously undertaking the immense but ultimately achievable task of building a truly peaceful and just world.
Right. So rather than just saying, oh, this is how it is and being despondent about it, it's like, no, we recognize this as a step in a process.
Exactly.
And we need to take that next step.
Right. And again, it draws upon Teilhard de Chardin, who suggests that what might appear on the surface as a mere insatiable hunger for material well-being is actually a much deeper, perhaps even unconscious longing for a higher state of being.
Okay.
And the full realization of our inherent human potential.
That leads nicely into the idea of confidence in humanity's ultimate outcome.
Yes.
Despite the serious challenges that are highlighted, there's an underlying optimistic view
absolutely
being presented here.
Yeah. The Baha'i community holds a firm belief that humanity not only can but will successfully navigate these current trials
Okay.
and ultimately emerge into a more unified and peaceful era.
Okay.
This transformative period, though challenging, will ultimately unlock the vast potentialities inherent in the station of man and allow us to realize the full measure of his destiny on Earth.
So there's a deep-seated conviction in this inherent capacity of humanity to overcome its current difficulties.
Yes, exactly.
What does this positive future look like?
Well, the vision offered is truly inspiring.
Okay.
It suggests a future where issues like widespread poverty, preventable illness, and the profound isolation of loneliness could become rare misfortunes.
Okay.
It envisions a world where the extraordinary genius we see manifested in a few individuals today could become a more common characteristic of humanity as a whole.
Okay, so this is a really positive vision.
Very positive for the future. However, the statement also includes a critical condition. This positive future is most probable if we can collectively avoid self-destruction before reaching this stage of maturity.
Right.
So the choice, it powerfully reminds us, ultimately rests with our current generation and the decisions we make.
Okay, so this isn't some preordained thing.
Right.
We actually have agency in this.
Exactly.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
The statement then shifts its focus to the human spirit and religion.
Okay.
What's the connection being explored here?
Well, this section delves into the unique and essential qualities of the human spirit,
Okay.
particularly our capacity for intellect, our inherent moral compass, and our deep-seated inclination towards transcendence and the ultimate reality,
Right.
which in the Baha'i teachings we understand as God.
Okay.
Religion is presented in the statement as the primary and most potent link between humanity and this ultimate reality, playing a vital role in both our individual spiritual growth and the collective social progress of humankind.
So it's not just about our individual connection with God.
Right.
It's about how that then influences the wider community.
Exactly. It's about how it helps humanity progress as a whole.
And it touches on this inborn quest for spiritual reality that, seems to be a universal human characteristic.
Yes. The statement underscores that this yearning for something beyond the material, this innate desire to understand our place in the cosmos and connect with a higher power, is a fundamental aspect of human nature.
Yeah.
And it suggests that as we move forward into this coming age with its advanced technology and potentially greater leisure time religion in its pure and unified form, will truly flourish as a boundless realm for personal freedom and creative expression, ultimately fulfilling the deepest aspirations of the human soul.
But the statement acknowledges a significant shift in focus that has occurred in the West over the past few centuries.
Yes, over the past 3 centuries, to be precise.
Okay.
Western society has increasingly prioritized materialism, focusing primarily on understanding and mastering the physical world. This emphasis, while leading to significant scientific and technological advancements, has often come at the expense of spiritual contemplation and the cultivation of our inner lives.
Right. So there's been this kind of de-emphasis on the spiritual and an overemphasis on
Exactly,
yes.
And the statement quotes the renowned historian Arnold Toynbee, who speaks of the inherent pain and profound difficulty involved in reversing this long-established trend, in turning our gaze inward once again, and in reawakening the spiritual faculties that have been comparatively neglected for so long.
It's almost like we've gone down one path for so long that it's really difficult to turn back.
To turn around.
Okay, which leads to the assertion that no serious attempt can ignore religion when trying to solve the world's problems.
Exactly. The statement emphasizes the undeniable and enduring role that religion has played and continues to play in shaping human history and society, despite the unfortunate instances where its misinterpretation and perversion have led to conflict. So it's recognizing that religion has been misused.
Absolutely.
But it's still a vital force. And it again quotes Arnold Toynbee, who astutely described religion as a fundamental faculty of human nature. And the central argument here is that a truly transformative change of heart, one deeply inspired by genuine religious principles, is absolutely essential to overcome the grave threats to our collective survival and to effectively implement new, more constructive ideals for global order.
So it's really saying that we can't ignore religion. We need to look at how it can help us create the society that we're all longing for. And the statement directly quotes Bahá'u'lláh on this crucial role of religion as a social force.
Okay.
What does he say?
Well, Bahá'u'lláh states with immense power and clarity that religion is the greatest of all means for the establishment of order in the world and for the peaceful contentment of all that dwell therein.
Wow, so it's really emphasizing the importance of religion.
Yes, and the statement then goes on to describe the profoundly negative consequences that inevitably follow when religion is either eclipsed or becomes corrupted.
Okay, so what happens when religion is either ignored or misused?
Well, it leads to societal chaos, widespread injustice,
Right.
the debasement of human character,
Okay.
a loss of fundamental trust and confidence, the weakening of social discipline, the stifling of conscience,
Right.
the obscuring of basic decency,
Okay.
the distortion of our understanding of duty and loyalty, and ultimately the extinguishing of hope and joy in the hearts of humanity.
So it's painting a very bleak picture
Right, it is.
of what happens when we don't
When
have
religion is not a guiding force.
a true religion guiding us.
Right.
So if religion is this vital force for good,
Mm-hmm.
where has humanity gone astray?
Well, that's a good question. And the next section of the statement addresses that. It's the source of misunderstandings. And this section directly points to humanity's own failings and the myriad misinterpretations and deliberate confusions that have been perpetuated throughout history in the very name of religion.
So it's not religion itself that's the problem. It's
Exactly.
How it's been?
How we have used it or misused it.
It's used.
Yeah, it critiques those who have stubbornly clung to outdated and rigid orthodoxies,
All right.
creating artificial and unnecessary barriers between the realms of faith and reason,
Right.
and between the seemingly separate domains of science and religion.
It's almost like we've created these false dichotomies,
Right,
where they don't
Exactly.
need to exist.
right.
And it includes a quote from Einstein on this very point.
Yes. Einstein's powerful words, "Religion without science is blind. Science without religion is lame,"
Okay.
are included to underscore the critical need for these two essential aspects of human understanding to work in harmony,
Right.
complementing and enriching each other rather than being seen as inherently opposed or mutually exclusive.
So there's really this call for this integral approach
Exactly.
to knowledge.
And the statement also makes a point of mentioning the Catholic Church's growing recognition and respect for elements of truth and holiness found in other religious traditions,
Okay.
referencing the important document Nostra Aetate, which signifies a hopeful movement towards greater interreligious understanding.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the statement brings up the universally recognized ethical principle of the Golden Rule.
Okay.
Why is this seemingly simple teaching given such significance in the context of achieving world peace?
Well, the Golden Rule, the fundamental teaching of treating others in the same way that we ourselves wish to be treated, is presented as a core ethical principle
Okay.
that resonates deeply within virtually all of the world's major religions.
Right.
The statement provides specific examples of this teaching from Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Christianity, Islam, and of course, the Baha'i faith itself.
So this is really cutting across religious boundaries.
Exactly. It's a universal principle. And it emphasizes that this seemingly straightforward principle carries immense moral weight.
Right.
And has the inherent power to foster peaceful and harmonious relationships at all levels of human interaction.
So?
It's a foundational unifying principle that despite its widespread recognition, humanity has consistently failed to fully appreciate and consistently apply.
So it's like we know it, but we don't always do it.
Exactly.
Right.
And the statement refers to the founders of these religions, these messengers of God, as the divine shepherds of humanity.
Okay, what's the implication of that description?
This section quotes Abdu'l-Baha'u'llah's son, an appointed successor who beautifully describes these prophets of God as divine shepherds whose primary purpose is to nurture love and foster unity among humankind,
Right.
to gather scattered peoples together into one fold, and to lay the very foundation for the understanding of the oneness of God.
So they're bringing humanity together.
Exactly. They're bringing humanity together
Under
the banner of the oneness of God.
oneness of God, okay.
And the absolutely crucial point emphasized is that all of these messengers throughout history are essentially one in spirit and purpose,
Right.
all promoting the same fundamental and eternal truths.
Okay, so there's this essential unity
Yes.
of religion that we may not always recognize.
Exactly. And the underlying reality of all genuine religions is one.
Okay.
And a true understanding of this principle leads directly to unity and reconciliation among their followers.
Right.
The ultimate purpose of religion, therefore, is the acquisition of divine virtues and the ongoing spiritual development of humanity.
So it's really about our spiritual transformation as individuals
Right.
and as a society.
Exactly.
And then the statement addresses this concerning resurgence of fanatical religious fervor.
Right.
That was a notable trend at the time the letter was written.
Right.
How does the statement interpret this phenomenon?
Well, rather than seeing it as a sign of growing religious strength or a positive development, the statement views this resurgence of fanaticism as more of a dying convulsion. The very violence, intolerance, and disruption associated with it are seen as evidence of its spiritual and moral bankruptcy.
And it suggests that the violence and disruption we see are actually symptoms of a deeper spiritual emptiness, a misunderstanding of true religious principles.
So it's not true religion that's causing these problems.
No, it's a distortion of religion. And the statement makes the point that this fanaticism is actually undermining the very values that promote unity and compassion, and it's negating the positive contributions that those religions have made to humanity.
It's ultimately self-defeating.
Exactly. And this leads to a discussion of why so many people have turned away from traditional religion and towards materialism or man-made ideologies. And the statement suggests that instead of fostering the oneness of humankind, these ideologies have often elevated the state, fueled nationalism, suppressed freedom of thought, or ignored the plight of the poor and marginalized.
It's like they've created new idols to worship.
In a sense, yes. And the statement doesn't shy away from pointing out the tragic consequences of these substitute faiths. The disillusionment, the persistent social and economic problems, the spiritual damage, the apathy. It even references the writings of Mao Zedong and the Communist Manifesto as examples of these kinds of secular ideologies.
And then it challenges this idea of the moral stewardship of materialism. It asks, where is this promised new world that materialistic ideologies have been talking about? Where is the genuine peace? Where are the significant cultural achievements?
And it points to this undeniable reality. Despite unprecedented wealth in the world, we have more people living in poverty and hunger than ever before. It even includes these statistics, some indicators of our madness, which highlight the vast sums of money being spent on military expenditures compared to things like economic aid.
It's a stark contrast.
It really is. And the statement argues that this glorification of material pursuits reinforces this false idea that we're inherently selfish and aggressive. It's building a society on a foundation of distrust.
So it's not giving us a true picture of who we are.
No. And then it quotes E.F. Schumacher, who talks about how the pursuit of production and wealth has become the ultimate goal, with other values taking a back seat. But the statement points out that this whole materialistic worldview is being challenged by what's happening in the world around us.
It's not working.
Right. And so the statement asks, what's the way forward? What's the solution? It argues that we need a fresh, unified effort to tackle these global problems. And that requires a fundamental shift in our attitudes and priorities.
It's about changing the way we think, the way we approach these challenges.
Exactly. And it challenges world leaders, regardless of their ideologies, to come together with a genuine desire to find solutions through consultation and collaboration. It even includes this chart, World Budgetary Priorities, 1983, which compares military spending to spending on health, education, and peacekeeping. It really forces us to look at where our priorities are.
To see where we're actually putting our resources.
Right. And the statement concludes this section with a powerful piece of advice. It says that if our cherished ideals, our institutions, our assumptions, even our religious interpretations, if they're no longer serving the well-being of humanity, we need to be willing to let them go. Because everything changes. Everything evolves.
So we need to be adaptable, willing to embrace new ways of thinking and doing things.
Exactly. And the message here is that our laws, our theories, our systems, they're meant to serve humanity, not the other way around. We should never prioritize preserving those systems over the well-being of people.
So, to sum up, the key message of the promise of world peace is this. Peace is inevitable, but it requires a strong spiritual and moral foundation. The oneness of humanity is absolutely central, and religion has a vital role to play. But it needs to be a unified understanding of religion, one that emphasizes our commonalities rather than our differences.
It's a call for a united global order based on justice, equity, and cooperation.
And it's a vision that's both hopeful and practical. It acknowledges the challenges we face, but it also offers a path forward.
It's about recognizing our collective potential to create a better world. And that brings us to our call to action for you, the listener. We encourage you to take some time to reflect on these ideas, to think about what role you can play in contributing to this movement towards peace.
What can you do in your own life, in your own community, to make a difference?
And if you want to delve deeper into these ideas, we highly recommend reading The Promise of World Peace in its entirety. It's a short but powerful document.
And if you're interested in exploring these themes further within the Baha'i writings, we suggest checking out Abdu'l-Bahá's book, Foundations of World Unity, and the collection of his talks called The Promulgation of Universal Peace. These really expand on the Baha'i vision for a peaceful, unified world.
And of course, you can also learn more about the Baha'i faith in general, its principles and activities.
There are so many resources available.
And finally, we want to leave you with this thought. In your daily life, how can you work to cultivate greater unity and break down the prejudices that divide us? How can you, in your own way, contribute to the vision of world peace outlined in this statement?
It's a question worth pondering.
It is. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.